Fourth grade, we are working on science today. It's Tuesday, the 21st of April, and we're looking at Compcheck 7.5 entitled Water and Soil, beginning on page 164. So you should have your books all out and ready to go. We're on 164, science, and we are going to first look on page 166 and read the comprehension check questions. We have number 1, why does water always seek to get to a lower level? Number 2, define erosion. Number 3, what two forms of water erode the soil? Number 4, what is a delta and where does its soil come from? Number 5, how can floods be helpful? Okay, so we're looking for those answers to those questions. And those are the high points of this lesson. So let's look at, beginning on page 164, water and soil, wearing away of topsoil. Job 28:10, he cutteth out rivers among the rocks, and his eye seeth every precious thing. One thing that keeps changing the earth's soil cover and crust is water. Perhaps you have seen the gullies that running water has made in the side of a hill that has been cut away. Water is seldom at rest. It is always seeking to get to a lower level because of the force of gravity. Okay, so our first question was, why does water always seek to get to a lower level? And it's because of the force of gravity. Okay, and you're not doing your comp check now. Okay, you can do that on your own when we finish reading. But I'm just pointing out where you can find these highlights. Okay, so water always seeks a lower level because of gravity. And water seldom at rest, meaning it's always moving. When water falls to the ground as rain, much of it runs off the surface of the ground to form tiny streams. The streams come together to form bigger streams. The larger streams often end in a pond, lake, or ocean where the downward flow of water has finally stopped. Gravity gives moving water its energy. You will remember that energy is ability to do work. As it travels, water easily carries away the soil from bare hillsides. Water has also carried away the rich topsoil from many farms. Erosion, the wearing away of the earth's topsoil, is a form of work done by water and by wind. Erosion is often harmful. Okay, so erosion, which is a wearing away of the topsoil, answers are question number 2, define erosion, which is the wearing away of the earth's topsoil, and that could be harmful. Soil conservation. The protection of soil from water erosion and other kinds of erosion is called soil conservation. Conservation is using nature's resources wisely. A natural resource is a material helpful to man which is found in or on the earth. Fertile soil and other natural resources are gifts of God and should be used with care. Farmers use a variety of methods to conserve soil. Soil erosion is reduced when trees are planted and strips of grass are left between fields. The leaves of trees keep the rain from beating down directly on soil and washing it away. Decayed leaves form a rich soil which soaks up water easily. Root systems absorb water and hold the soil in place. Some farmers also plant crops such as alfalfa or clover to cover and protect the soil. These crops also return nitrogen to the soil, making it fertile. All right, so conservation is using our natural resources wisely. And a natural resource is anything that God has created that is helpful to us. And it says, we talked about that farmers use a variety of methods to conserve soil. If they don't have good, fertile soil, they can't produce their crops. If they can't produce their crops, plants give us oxygen. We couldn't live without plants. And the food chain begins with plants, and plants are the only part of the food chain that create their own food. Soil erosion can reduce trees that are planted and strips of grass soil erosion, is reduced when trees are planted. It holds the root system and everything, holds the soil in its place so it doesn't wash away in the rain and stuff. So that's important. And it says that leaves that fall off of trees and are decaying actually go back into the soil. You know, it's a circle of life. God created our planet to refurbish itself, to keep cycling, to keep moving, to keep going. What God creates, it doesn't break, it doesn't wear away, it doesn't get old, it doesn't rot. Even the leaves from the trees that fall off of the tree go back into the soil and re-nourish it again. Okay, so pretty amazing. So root systems help keep topsoil in place, the roots of trees and plants and whatnot, and grasses and stuff is what that was talking about. And we know we need the soil to stay sturdy and steady for crops, and we know that we can't live without plants. Since the soil on hillsides erodes or wears away easily, farmers pay special attention to the way hillsides are cultivated. Contour plowing is one way to conserve soil on hillsides. Plowing the slope across instead of up and down forms ridges which slow down the flow of the water. In other places, sloping land is terraced by building the land up into wide, flat areas which make the hillsides look like an enormous staircase. Soil built up in this way is able to hold the rain because terraces prevent running water from forming gullies. All right, so if you look at the picture here, this is a hillside, and you could see that they have built horizontal rows, that means side to side, left to right, and you see the different levels. If that was all just a flat slope and it was all just soil, then when the rain comes, all of that mud would rush downward and destroy anything in its path. Unfortunately, people have actually died in mudslides because the mud covers them. It comes so quick and so fast and breaks away from the sides of the hill that it just covers them and they can't breathe. And so you can see the way that this is set up. It's at different levels and they have barriers. There's a barrier here, you can see that, and here and here. And so people consider that when they landscape, okay? And so that's pretty self-explanatory. Frozen water is also responsible for erosion. Water seeps into the cracks of rock. Do you remember that water, unlike other liquids, expands when it nears the freezing point? As the water freezes, it expands with enough force to crack the rock further apart. Glaciers are massive rivers of ice that move very slowly, carrying with them broken rocks and soil. So even frozen water can be responsible for erosion as water seeps into the cracks, it says, and it breaks up the soil. All right, so it says, what two forms of water erode the soil? And we know that it's rain. We talked about that with the hillsides, and even frozen water, okay? So rain and frozen water also are two things that can erode the soil. So that was number 3, all right? Because as the frozen water and stuff seeps into those cracks, it's gonna break and separate. The cracks in the earth, it'll break and separate and expand those holes, those wedges. And it expands, it says with enough force to crack the rock farther apart, deeper holes, more water goes into, they freeze, etc. And that's how glaciers are massive rivers of ice that move very slowly, carrying with them broken rocks and soil. All right, and we can see a glacier here in the picture. That's all frozen, okay? All right, so we've answered 3 questions already. Wow, we've answered why does water always seek to get into a lower level? We talked about gravity, and we talked about the definition of erosion and what 2 forms of water erode the soil. We said rain and frozen water. And so number 4, what is a delta? Where does its soil come from? Look at number 4. There's 2 answers there. Make sure you answer both. And number 5, how can floods be helpful? So let's look at water as a builder. I'm on page 165. Water does not just tear things down. It also works to build things up. in the in the little coves and pools along the edge of a stream, the water does not move very fast, and it deposits some of the fine bits of rock, sand, and decaying plant and animal material it has been carrying. The stream slows down as it reaches lower levels, and more of the particles that it was carrying settle to the bottom or at the sides of the stream bed. Matter that settles to the bottom or sides of a body of water is called sediment. During the summer, the edges of a glacier will melt, leaving a load of sediment behind. A river can carry its sediment all the way to its mouth and drop it there. After years and years, new land is built by the collection of sediment. As the sediment flows down, it stops at the mouth of the river, in other words, where the river begins, and it can start forming more land. It can build up more and more and more. This new land is called a delta. A delta, we needed to know what this is a deposit of sand and soil, usually in a triangular shape, at the mouth of some rivers. So here we see the delta. This is the mouth of the river here. Here's the river. This is the mouth of it, and we see it's in a little bit of a triangular shape there. And so a delta is a deposit of sand and soil, usually in a triangular shape, at the mouth of some rivers. Have you ever thought how powerful flowing water is? It is always working as it slowly tears down highlands and takes the material from them to build up lowlands. All right? So where does the soil come from? It said in a delta. And it says that here it talks about for sediment here, it talks about that it comes from the river, okay? So let me see exactly how they worded that. So we know that the delta is created by the bits of sand and broken rock in the river that has happened. As water is constantly moving, it's breaking away and breaking down the dirt, the soil, and the sand, and it flows down the river, and then it ends up stopping at the delta. So for number 4, it talked about what is the delta, and we say it's a deposit of sand and soil, and at the mouth of a river. Make sure you say at the mouth of a river. Where does the sediment come from? Well, it flows down the through the streams and the rivers and stuff. It flows down, broken down rock and sand and whatnot, and then it forms the delta. Okay, so it comes from the river itself, from the sediment, the dirt in the river, from the breaking down of the rock that the running water does. It rushes on that. It's gonna wear it down over time. Okay. Floods. Now our question was, how are floods helpful? Floods are caused when a great deal of water flows into an area, causing a river to overflow its banks. If you've ever been filling up your swimming pool in the backyard and you went to make some punch or something, or to get a popsicle, you left the hose on, and then your pool overflows. Or unfortunately, sometimes that's happened. You start your bath water. You want to take a bath, and the bathtub overflows or the sink overflows. Well, when water falls from the sky, when it's raining and there's so much rain, it could overflow the rivers and cause flooding. Okay, the ponds, the streams, the lakes, the rivers in that particular area, and it could cause flooding. So floods are often caused when large amounts of snow melt quickly. Sudden heavy rainfall may also cause flooding. Floods can be both destructive and helpful. So our question was, how are they helpful? We can see how they can be destructive. That's kind of a no-brainer. So flooding waters have changed the courses of rivers, left people homeless, destroyed crops, and caused death. But some people of the world depend upon floods because these floods carry rich soils from higher lands down to lower lands used for farming. Men have found ways to control floods in order to prevent great damage. Sometimes channels are dug to allow excess water to flow quickly out to sea. In some places, the riverbanks are built up higher to protect the land on either side of the river. These high embankments are called levees. So they almost make walls, like a dam, to hold the water from coming through. Dams are also built, like I said, to hold back floodwaters. When danger is over, the water behind the dam can be slowly released, because it doesn't do any good if we have the dam to hold the water from flowing down into a city. It doesn't do any good if we all let it out really fast. You let it out just a little bit at a time, or it would re-flood everything again. So here you can see a picture of the flood, and these are just the roofs of some buildings and homes, and everything else is underwater. So that's pretty scary. So we build levees, we build dams in areas where it has a lot of torrential, meaning really, really heavy rainfall, and to hold the water back. And sometimes, unfortunately, those levees themselves, the pressure of the water, those levees will break down. And the water just goes over them, or they literally break apart, and the water just rushes through. We see that. We've seen that in places like Louisiana and stuff in the South, where they have a lot of flooding through hurricane-type weather and whatnot. All right, so again, the way that floods are helpful is it says that the water that comes down from higher levels, like let's say hills or mountains, flow with rich soil in it. Remember the sediment that we talked about that flows from the rivers to form a delta? That soil that comes down and washes down the mountain or the hillside has a lot of rich and fertile soil to it that flows down right into the farmer's orchard, right into the farmer's crops, and that helps to feed the soil. So that can be very helpful, as long as it doesn't, it can destroy it too. If it's too much rain, the crops will flood. But that's how it is helpful. It carries rich soil, like I said, from higher lands down to lower lands used for farming. So the good soil up on the top of the mountain can flow down into the farm, and that helps fertilize the plants, and the farmer is very grateful for that. So that's the way it can be helpful. All right, so that should answer number 5 for you. It says here, consider, can you think of a time, I'm right here, in the history of the earth when the world was completely covered with water? Look up Genesis 1, 9, and 10, which mentions a time before the continents had risen from the sea. Also read Genesis 7, which tells of a great flood. Where do you suppose all the water came from? So think about that for a second. Think about that. All right, so that was entitled 7.5, Water and Soil. Quite a bit we learned, and you should be very, very well prepared to do a great job on your comp check.